Welcome back to Exciting Europe.
Scattered across the world are some of the greatest achievements of human civilization. To protect them, the United Nations created a designation, the UNESCO World Heritage Site. But what does that label actually mean? It's not just a tourist badge or a historic plaque. To be inscribed by UNESCO, a place must possess what they call outstanding universal value. It means that if this specific site were destroyed, a piece of our shared human story would be lost forever. It means the building, the monument, or the landscape represents a definitive leap forward in human creativity, culture, or engineering. And this brings us to Barcelona. This single city holds 9 UNESCO World Heritage Site inscriptions. Remarkably, they are split between a fierce rivalry of 2 architectural titans who completely rewrote the rules of physics and beauty. The first is Antoni Gaudí, whose surreal, melting buildings are the face of the city. But what if I told you that Barcelona's legendary architectural explosion wasn't a solo act? On one side, you have Gaudí, the deeply religious recluse who looked to nature for engineering. On the other, you have Lluís Domènech i Montaner, the intellectual politician who used steel and stained glass to build monuments for the public good. Today, we are diving deep into all 9 masterpieces. We'll look at the hidden codes inside Gaudí's residential homes, the forgotten engineering sandbox outside the city, and the massive public health complex that looks more like a royal palace than a hospital. Now, while today's video is a grand overview of all of them, we have actually produced an in-depth, dedicated video for every single one of these 9 UNESCO sites right here on this channel. You can find the direct links to all of those deep dives in the description below to explore your favorites later. To truly understand why Antoni Gaudí changed architecture forever, we have to go back to the beginning. Before the curving stone and the organic shapes, there was Casa Vicens. Inscribed by UNESCO as part of Gaudí's collective works, this was his very first major commission, built between 1883 and 1885 for a wealthy stockbroker. And looking at it, it looks almost nothing like the Gaudí you think you know. Instead of curves, we see sharp angles and geometric lines. This is Gaudí's early period, a style heavily influenced by Moorish and Oriental design that was sweeping through the region at the time. But look closer, and you'll see the genetic code of his genius. Look at these vibrant yellow flowers painted on the green and white ceramic tiles. Those are French marigolds. Before digging the foundation, Gaudí found these exact flowers growing on the property. Instead of clearing them away, he decided to immortalize them in the facade. And look at this iron gate. See the intricate texture of the palm leaves? Gaudí didn't sculpt these by hand from memory. He literally took real palm leaves from the garden, cast them in clay molds, and poured melted iron to create a perfect replica. It was his first rule of architecture. Nature does not lie. Copy nature. As word of this eccentric young architect spread, he caught the eye of the wealthiest industrialist in the region, Güell. Güell would become Gaudí's ultimate patron, funding his wildest ideas for decades. And their first grand collaboration sits just off the famous La Rambla Boulevard, Palau Güell. Step inside and the mood changes instantly. It feels like entering a high society medieval fortress. This neighborhood was incredibly cramped, meaning Gaudí had almost no space and very little natural light to work with. So he engineered a brilliant illusion. He designed the entire palace around a massive 3-story central salon. Look up at the ceiling. That isn't just a roof. It's a parabolic dome perforated with tiny, conical holes. During the day, natural sunlight filters through these holes from the rooftop, making the entire room look like a planetarium under a star-filled night sky. At night, Güell would host elite parties, and servants would place lanterns outside on the roof so the stars would shine even in the dark. And it's here, up on the roof of Palau Güell, where Gaudi's signature style finally breaks free. He took ordinary, functional objects, exhaust pipes and chimneys, and turned them into a whimsical forest of 20 colorful sculptures, covered in shattered glass and ceramic tiles. He had proven he could master light, space, and wealthy patrons. But his next project with Güell would push him out of the city altogether, into a failed experiment that inadvertently created one of the most famous public spaces on Earth. In 1900, Eusèbe Güell approached Gaudí with a radical vision. He wanted to build an exclusive, high-end residential estate for the elite, high up on a hill, away from the smog of the city's factories. Today, we know it as Park Güell. But here is the ultimate plot twist. Park Güell was a massive financial failure. The plan was to build 60 luxury villas, but the location was too remote, transport was difficult, and the wealthy simply didn't want to live up here. Only 2 houses were ever built. The project went completely bankrupt and was abandoned. Years later, the city bought the land and opened it as a public park. And what a gift it was. Gaudí didn't flatten this mountain. He integrated his architecture into it. Look at these stone viaducts. They look like frozen tree trunks growing right out of the hillside. And the famous serpentine bench? It's covered in broken ceramic shards, a technique Gaudí pioneered using shattered pieces of tiles to wrap around complex curves. But the absolute mastermind behind the bench's explosion of color was his hidden partner, Josep Maria Güell. He had workmen collect broken plates, cups, and glass from local factories, arranging them like an abstract painting to create a vibrant masterpiece born from a commercial disaster. Following the failure of the park, Gaudí returned to the city center, where wealthy industrialists were competing to build the most outrageous homes possible. This stretch of road became known as the Block of Discord, and Gaudí's contribution was Casa Batlló. Step back and look at the facade of Casa Batlló. It doesn't have a single straight line. The local columns look like human bones, and the balconies look like the masks of a carnival, or skulls, depending on who you ask. The entire building is a visual metaphor for the sea and local legend. The colorful tiles shift from green to blue, mimicking the surface of the ocean. And look up at the roof. That undulating curve represents the scaly back of the dragon slain by St. George, the patron saint of the region. Inside, Gaudí meticulously designed everything down to the doorknobs, which he literally molded by squeezing soft clay in his own hand to ensure a perfect ergonomic grip. Right up the street sits the final apartment building Gaudí would ever design, Casa Milà, famously known to locals as La Pedrera, or the Stone Quarry. When this was completed in 1912, the public thought Gaudí had finally gone completely insane. The local newspapers published brutal satirical cartoons mocking it. They called it an airplane hangar, a creature from the deep, and an eyesore that ruined property values. But UNESCO recognizes it as a triumph of structural engineering. This building has no load-bearing walls. Instead, it uses an innovative iron skeleton and stone pillars. This meant the wealthy tenants could completely knock down and redesign the interior walls of their apartments whenever they wanted, a concept decades ahead of its time. And the roof? It's an architectural landscape. Gaudí took functional smoke vents and ventilation shafts and transformed them into an army of stone guardians, standing watch over the city. By this point, Gaudí was at the absolute peak of his secular fame. But he was about to abandon private commissions entirely. He walked away from the money, the mansions, and high society to dedicate the rest of his life to a forgotten sandbox outside the city, and a basilica that would outlive him. To see where Gaudí truly cracked the code of engineering, you have to leave the city center and head 20 minutes away to a historic textile village. This is the crypt at Colònia Güell. It's an unfinished church, but UNESCO considers it one of his most important sites because it was Gaudí's secret architectural laboratory. Before built-in computers and 3D modeling existed, Gaudí spent 10 years here inventing a mind-blowing way to calculate weight distribution. He built a model out of strings and tiny hanging bags of birdshot. By letting gravity pull the strings downward, it naturally created perfect geometric curves. He then took a picture of the model, turned it upside down, and boom! He had the perfect blueprints for pillars that could hold massive weight without needing traditional external buttresses. It looks strange and tilted, but it was structurally flawless. And once he proved this experimental sandbox worked, he took the exact formula back to the city to build his ultimate masterpiece. This brings us to the most famous construction site in human history, the Sagrada Familia. Gaudí poured the final 12 years of his life entirely into this temple, living out of a workshop on site like a monk, until his tragic death in 1926. But here is a massive detail that most travel guides completely miss. The entire church is not a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Because UNESCO only protects the authentic, original handiwork of a master, the inscription specifically covers only two sections, the crypt and the spectacular nativity facade. Look closely at this facade. It looks completely organic, as if it grew out of the earth rather than being built. Gaudí designed it to face the rising sun, symbolizing the birth of Christ. He literally used local plants, animals, and even plaster casts of everyday people from the neighborhood to sculpt the biblical scenes. It is dense, chaotic, and brimming with life. Step inside, and you realize you aren't standing in a traditional, dark European basilica. You are standing inside a living forest. Gaudí designed these massive pillars to branch out at the top, like trees, distributing the roof's weight perfectly using the exact string model tricks he invented at Colònia Güell. It is the absolute pinnacle of his architectural vision, a temple where structure, religion, and nature become one. Gaudí's 7 UNESCO sites represent a journey of pure, unbridled imagination. But his organic dreams were only half of the city's golden age. It's time to cross the city and meet his brilliant rival, the man who used steel and light to build for the soul of the public. While Antoni Gaudí was a deeply religious recluse designing private mansions for the ultra-wealthy, his contemporary, Lluís Domènech i Montaner, was a charismatic intellectual, a politician, and a fierce advocate for public culture. The two men were in a constant, unwritten race to define the soul of modern Barcelona. And while Gaudí looked downward into the soil and roots of nature, Montaner looked upward into pure light and community. Now, if you want to understand how this incredible architectural battle fits into the wider story of the city, We have a highly recommended video right here on the channel called The Top 5 Geniuses Who Built Barcelona. That video goes far beyond just Gaudí and Domènech i Montaner, revealing the hidden masterminds who engineered the iconic street grid and the secret artists who sculpted the city's most famous details. I highly suggest watching it to see the complete puzzle come together. Domènech i Montaner's first individual UNESCO masterpiece sits tucked away in a tight neighborhood alleyway, the Palau de la Musica Catalana. Completed in 1908 as a concert hall for a local choral society, the exterior is a celebration of Catalan culture. But the real architectural magic happens when you step through the doors and walk into the main auditorium. This room is a jaw-dropping explosion of color. What you are looking at is the ultimate expression of Catalan Art Nouveau. Montaner did something completely unprecedented for a theater. He built a giant iron and steel skeleton, and instead of filling the gaps with heavy stone walls, he filled them entirely with towering walls of stained glass. And look right at the center of the ceiling. This inverted stained glass dome is shaped like a drop of liquid sun. Because the walls and the ceiling are practically made of glass, you don't need a single electric light bulb during a daytime performance. The natural sunlight floods the theater, bathing the performers and the audience in a shifting palette of golden hour light. It is a monument built entirely for music, light, and the public. But Montaner's greatest contribution to Barcelona wasn't a concert hall. It was a sprawling, utopian city within a city, designed to heal the human spirit. This brings us to the 9th and final UNESCO masterpiece on our list, and it is arguably Barcelona's greatest hidden gem, the Recinte Modernista de Sant Pau. When you look at this sprawling, majestic complex of 27 colorful pavilions, it looks like a royal palace or an elite university campus. But for an entire century, this was a fully functioning public hospital for Barcelona's working class. At the turn of the 20th century, hospitals were traditionally dark, sterile, terrifying places. But Luis Domènech i Montaner had a radical avant-garde philosophy. He believed that beauty could heal. He argued that a patient surrounded by natural light, colorful art, and fresh air would recover far quicker than one trapped in a colorless room. So, he built a utopian medical city. He designed underground tunnels to move medical supplies and patients silently out of sight, keeping the surface peaceful. He filled the gardens with medicinal plants and aromatic flowers to purify the air. Every single ward was flooded with natural light through massive windows, and the ceilings were decorated with cheerful ceramic tiles. It is a monument of pure empathy, a masterpiece where world-class architecture was used not to stroke the ego of a billionaire, but to bring dignity and healing to the poor. 9 World Heritage Sites, 2 legendary architects, 1 city that dared to let them build the impossible. When you pull back the layers of Barcelona, you realize it is so much more than just a standard vacation destination. It is a living monument to human imagination. It's a city where a deeply religious recluse like Gaudí and a brilliant public servant like Montaner could look at the exact same streets and completely re-engineer what it means to build spaces for the human soul. If you're planning a trip here, don't just stop at the crowded facades. Take the time to explore both masters, the organic dreams of Gaudí and the luminous public works of Montaner. But we also cover the practical logistics to make your visit seamless and successful. Check out our step-by-step guides on mastering the local public transport network, including exactly how to navigate to and from the airport like a local. So, which of these 9 masterpieces are you putting at the absolute top of your bucket list? Let me know in the comments below. If this deep dive helped you see the city in a whole new light, hit that like button and subscribe to Exciting Europe for more stories behind the world's most incredible art, history, and architecture. Subscribe today, keep exploring, and we will see you in the next adventure.